Hey, happy Wednesday, everyone. You know, AMD made a big acquisition. Is it all about AI? The White House is investing millions into open source. And we're still getting tech layoffs. I thought the economy's better. Let's discuss it all on Techstrong Gang. Happy Wednesday, everyone. It's Alan Schimmel here for Techstrong Gang. We've got an interesting gang lineup of stories and a great panel of experts to talk about them today. Let me introduce you first off, who's on our gang show today. Joining us is our roving editor based out in Silicon Valley, the one and only Jon Swartz. Hey, Jon, welcome. How are you?
Hi, Alan. Hi, everybody.
Very good. Continuing, I guess, west to east, stopping in the famed San Angelo, Texas, right out of Abilene, is our AI and digital transformation editor, Amanda Razzani. Amanda,
hello.
Good to see you. I haven't been on with you in a little bit. I've been traveling. It's good to have you on here. Continuing east, but northeast versus southeast. Hailing from Rhinebeck, New York, just a mere 90 minutes out of New York City. The one and only Steven Dickens. Hey, Steven, how are you?
Yeah, good. 2 days running. What have I done to be so lucky, right?
Yeah, no. Hey, man, it's all good. It's all good. You're earning your keep, man. We appreciate, but seriously, we appreciate your presence and views here. It adds a lot to the show. And then, of course, joining me is now still here in Florida.
Still here, man.
He might be migrating. Flapping his wings, our Chief Content Officer, Mike Vizard.
Birds are heading north in the fall.
Birds are heading north in the fall, kind of counterclockwise here, but okay. Mike Vizard. Hey, Mike, how's it going?
It's going great, man. Always happy to be here.
Absolutely. All right, so let's jump in. Yesterday's big news. Actually, it was Monday that this story broke, but we actually played, and we're going to replay it on here. Daniel Newman and Patrick Moorhead over at 6.5 Media covered it on their 6.5 podcast yesterday that we're going to insert here. But AMD made just under $5 billion. What's another $100 million here and there? $4.9 billion acquisition for a company maybe a lot of you haven't heard of, ZT Systems, based out of Secaucus, New Jersey.
Well, why don't we run that little segment now?
You want to run it first?
Run it first so people know what we're talking about.
All right, let's go. Bit. Yeah, no. So actually Patrick does a great job, as does Daniel in this segment here. We're going to go to the 6.5 Media podcast. It's available also on Techstrong TV. But here's Patrick Moorhead and Daniel Newman on this AMD story.
Here's the news. AMD is acquiring ZT Systems for $4.9 billion in cash stock. They're going to do a lot of it out of cash. They're going to do a little bit of a debt offering as well. And you might be like, who in the heck is ZT Systems? Well, their biggest customers, rumored, are AWS and Azure. They design, they integrate, they manufacture, and deploy rack-level hyperscale AI systems. So think about the entire rack and everything that goes into that and everything that's connected to it. They have customer support, they have installation, everything. It's about 2,000 people. They're located in New Jersey, Secaucus, a company at $10 billion revenue that you never heard of. And, you know, they've been in business for 30 years. In 94, they started off with PCs. And in 2024, the company says it ships hundreds and thousands of servers annually. So what does this mean for AMD? So competitively, the game has changed, right? And NVIDIA really drove this with, starting at the chip, and then going to the platform, and then doing not only the GPU, but also the CPU and the networking. And hey, let's just do the whole system, and basically a DGX rack. And they accelerated that cadence to not once every 3 years, but once a year. So there's a lot of innovation, and it's very hard to keep this wheel of innovation going. So AMD, who's been very competent in hardware, and right, you don't get the $4.5 billion of backlog without having infrastructure capability. But how do you go from $4.5 billion to attacking an addressable market? Not my numbers, not your numbers, but AMD's numbers of a $400 billion GPU and accelerator TAM in 2027. You've got to find a way, you've got to make a big move to parabolically achieve that revenue growth. And this is exactly what they did here. This adds on to the $1 billion of investment that AMD has made in software with companies like Silo, Nod.ai, and Mipsology. And, I believe that this is going to come down to execution. And I think AMD's Lisa Su, who I got the pleasure of talking with last night, is an absolute monster at acquisition. And also, we're looking at, just numbers here. It's a lot less people and a lot smaller than their last acquisition, which was Xilinx. So I'm not saying this is a layup, and not saying there's zero risk, but it makes total sense. So there's about 1,000 employees in the design and about 1,000 employees in manufacturing and deployment. Lisa is going to spin out and sell the manufacturing arm. It would be totally dilutive. I mean, Supermicro, their margins are in the single digits.
Yeah.
Which would not be good for AMD, who operates, 40% margins on there. So, Dan, I left you a little bit of oxygen. I think a lot of oxygen in the room. I blew through that in about 3 minutes. What is your take?
If I could point everybody out there that's watching to Pat's extensive takes, Forbes, I think he posted a LinkedIn article. You definitely use that inside access to give what I would say the most comprehensive rundown of anything I read this morning. I'm not blowing smoke. I'm not blowing smoke. I wrote the second best analysis because I put some work into that as well. Everybody that's not watching that, I just winked really loudly. But Pat, look, here's what's going on, right? The number of 400 billion is about twice what our number is in terms of the size of that particular space. But there are reasons to believe that we are grossly underestimating the speed by which AI proliferates. And that has a lot to do with these sort of various bubble perspectives that are out in the marketplace, this perception of a bubble. If it is sort of a slow at first, then all at once sort of implementation at the end, and then these cloud scale companies, these SaaS and ISV providers are going to be building out AI and delivering it at scale, it's going to happen a lot faster than most of these CAGR numbers reflect. And that was where Lisa could end up being very accurate with her big ambitions in terms of 400 billion. Having said that, I mean, the company's making the investments here to be able to put the designs together. You didn't really use the word, Pat. You did in your article, not here, but about being open. But look, there are these sort of two schools of thoughts right now when it comes to design. There's kind of this all-in, end-to-end, DGX, super cloud, everything built in one place, all NVIDIA, top to bottom. Anything that's not is sort of all masked as a single SKU, right? And you just consume it. And then there's the other side of the house, which is, companies like AMD partnering with companies like Broadcom, building out systems with open architectures, using different, standard Ethernet network, using advanced GPUs, various different CPU head nodes, and being able to put these things together and then develop upon them. And so that's also where this sort of investment in software has come into play. You had this big CUDA lock-in that everyone talks about, but we've seen AMD making big investments in software. We know Intel has referenced a future with one API, which we'll have to wait until they get to their discrete data center GPU. But having said that, this whole thing is sort of evolving to a software battle. So being able to build the most significant designs, being able to go open versus closed, and then the other thing that I think is really important to mention is what the hyperscale cloud providers want. And I think there is a push and pull here. Of course, they want what everyone's going to quickly consume. They want to sell through. And I think NVIDIA has been a big success for them. Having said that, on the other side, I think a lot of them want more choice and openness. They want to be able to bring some competitive price in. They need more capacity. They want to be able to build their own network backends, their own data center. They want to be able to build uniqueness into their data centers with how they handle networking, for instance. We know AWS has gone that route in some capacities, and they want to be able to address that. And so I think AMD should get some credit here for sort of leaving that door open. They're not going down the manufacturing. They're not going to go kind of closed end to end on the box, but they are going to provide the design that enables that open capability, Pat. So, I haven't spent as much time in this as you have, but it seems like an encouraging way to drive that $4.5 billion, north, the $4.5 billion of committed annual pipeline north. Of course, attaching more Epic, it's not just about Instinct. It's about the whole stack. And then of course, software. And if it's true about this sort of expansion into, PyTorch and JAX and higher abstraction layers where programming can be done. And of course, they're adding more capacity, then ROCm can land. And that's been kind of one of those friction points, is how successful and how quick can the company move with ROCm.
Yeah, good stuff, Dan. And yeah, I failed to bring up that, but I did in my article on the software side. They made 3 tuck-in acquisitions, and even though ROCm's been around forever, it was really focused on HPC, which is not hyperscaler data center generative AI.
Yep.
One final thought, Dan. It appears to me that the NVIDIA and AMD combo is putting, with this acquisition, they're putting even more distance between them and their competitors. I am really, again, interested to see Intel and what they're doing with next generation accelerators, and in 2025 data center GPUs. And Intel has some extensive capabilities, particularly on the hardware side. They get rack scale architecture. In fact, years ago they actually coined that term. But it'll be interesting to see how Intel can turn that into gold as well.
So gang, you heard Patrick and Daniel's take on this. AMD is aggressive, being very aggressive in this AI space. Of course, NVIDIA is at the top of the stretch, leading by a mile, but that's not. It's a long race. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And this is seems to be an aggressive move by AMD. Listening to the numbers from Patrick and Daniel, I was a little surprised. I mean, ZT Systems does about $10 billion a year in revenue, but their margin, it's like classic kind of hardware margins where you cut each other's throat for a point or two.
Well, Secaucus, New Jersey was the hardware capital of the universe.
I had some interesting adventures in Secaucus, New Jersey when I was younger, but we'll leave that off the show. Gang members, what do you think here? Is this a smart move by AMD?
I think it was a necessary move, right? The AMD, I think, and I also think Patrick worked at AMD a long time ago, so he has a really good insight on the company. Yeah, well, they've been spending more than $1 billion to expand their ecosystem and improve their AI software offerings, and this is all about NVIDIA, right? Filling gaps where you can't compete with NVIDIA. And in a sense, AMD through ZT Systems wants to enrich or enhance its status as an ecosystem partner for companies that are diving into AI and who isn't. And in a sense, they want to more quickly test and roll out AI GPUs for Microsoft and other companies they work with. I mean, I leave it to Amanda and Steven on filling in more, but I think it was a necessary move and an aggressive move. And NVIDIA has shown a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit of vulnerability of late. So it was necessary.
The interesting one for me, Alan, is you pay $4.9 billion for a company that turns over $10 billion, and then you plan to sell part of it off after you've acquired it. I'm just struggling with the math here.
That's what I was trying to get at.
Valuation. So we're saying this is half 1 year's revenue. And I need to dig in. I'm starting to dig in today to understand more. But, you look at I know the valuations are compressed, and we're sort of we're not in the 2021 kind of race to acquire anything at whatever value type gold rush. But a valuation that below 1 year's revenue. And also then I ask the question, what's the spin out going to be once they've acquired it? We saw this with OpenText buying assets from Rocket Software, and the whole sort of OpenText, Micro Focus, Rocket Software kind of mix. I'm trying to triangulate the math here from evaluation and what these assets are worth. Is this the top of the peak from an AI perspective of we've seen something, we just need to get our hands on it, and they're overpaying, but then the overpaying doesn't make sense when it's half 1 year's revenue. So I'm just trying to, there's obvious, Lisa Su's probably one of the smartest execs out there, so there's definitely something here, but I don't think we've heard the end of this, and I'm trying to sort of get my head around it all.
Yeah, can I just add quickly? It's also not only do they overpay. I think you're right, but what they intend to do with, I think there are like 2,500 employees at ZT Systems, and they're only going to keep like 1,000 engineers. So they're basically, it's kind of a IP acquisition because they're going to gut the organization, from what I understand. So
maybe they had to overpay to get the deal, or maybe they were competing against another offer.
But that makes sense to me. But then you're paying half 1 year's revenue, so have they got a steal here? I mean, I don't know many valuations of companies that are underneath 1 year's revenue.
So on that,
it doesn't triangulate for me.
No,
Alan.
it doesn't. I agree with you. I think you got to throw out the top line number in this deal and look at it as an EBITDA deal, right? What percentage, what multiple of EBITDA did they pay? Mm-hmm. I mean, the profitability, the EBITDA for ZT, I think Patrick mentioned it, was in the low single digits. So assuming they're a $10 billion company, and their EBITDA was, let's call it $1 billion then or less, 4.9 is 5 times EBITDA. 4 or 5 times EBITDA is normal in many businesses. I'm not saying it's right here. I'm just saying, that might be one yardstick how to measure it. What I think is interesting is they threw up the smoke screen about, hey, because, big tech acquisitions are under such scrutiny, we're going to sell off the server business. And what they're not saying is we're also kicking out 1,500, more than half of the jobs.
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
Steven, put some context around this because, stock notwithstanding, we have these IT folks who kind of trying to figure out what all this means. We have super micros out there. We have cloud service providers are building their own chips. What is the market shaping up to be? Because, back in the day, processor companies did processors and motherboards, and server companies built servers, and now it seems to be all kind of a little bit of a mishigash. So where are we?
Yeah, I mean, well, that space is changing. You've got hyperscale cloud providers creating their own custom silicon. We've got Microsoft with Maya. We've got Google with Trillium, what used to be TPU. We've got AWS with Inferentia and Trainium. So I think that kind of whole landscape has changed. Apple making their own chips now for their phones, and we were talking about Mac Mini only yesterday with the M4. So I think the whole sort of landscape has changed. Everybody's looking at custom silicon for a particular purpose. The fabs and the working with TSMC. There's open source approaches now. You've got people like Sci5 with the RISC-V architecture. So I think, whereas if you wound back sort of 30, 40 years ago, you had kind of Intel and IBM making sort of processors for particular things, and that there wasn't a lot of choices. There's a lot of choices now. We're seeing ARM with their architecture in a lot of devices. AMD, obviously, on a tear. Intel in a tough period. So the whole sort of landscape is really sort of challenging anyway. and then you throw AI into the mix over the last 2 years. It's a crazy market at the moment. So I think we're seeing, it's one of those inflection points for me, like the internet was in 99, 2000, like cloud was, like mobile was in 2007, 2008. We're at one of those points in the market where the world shakes, things happen, and then we get on a trend line for the next 5 to 10 years. That's where I'd see it, Mike.
One of the things that Daniel and Patrick talked about is CT Systems does a lot of work in the cloud, and maybe that's the business that AMD is after because they're going to sell the server side of it. And to me, the server side of the business is, classic white box stuff, and the margins in the white box space have always been difficult. So is that part of the thinking here, is that, they're bifurcating between traditional servers and more of this cloud architecture mindset?
I mean, if you look at the AI market, there's really 4 companies buying NVIDIA's GPUs. It's the 3 big hyperscalers and Meta. So,
not Oracle?
At a big scale, Alan, yes, obviously they are. Tesla are buying as well. There's a few other players, but it's literally those 4, then a country mile, then the rest. So, who's shipping into those big 4, these systems? Is it Lenovo with their sort of systems that go into hyperscalers? Is it Supermicro? Meta's got its own server architecture and its own sort of rack design that it's open sourced. I mean, that whole space gets interesting very fast. I mean, all I can say is here, Lisa Su's a very, very smart CEO, and they've bought something that they think strategically fits in the jigsaw puzzle. Trying to discern that from a press release and some of the public statements is just, we'll see how this plays out over the next 2 years is my view.
I think she mentioned something to Reuters, though. I think it was a Reuters interview where she said that ZT Systems' importance is going to accelerate the deployment of AMD's AI rack scale systems with cloud and enterprise customers. Something she pointed out. And also that I think Daniel had mentioned the AI chips market forecast is going to top $400 billion by the end of 2027. And to add on to something somebody said earlier, you kind of want to overpay and get deals done as quickly as possible. This one, I think, isn't going to close until probably next year. But in the background, you're thinking about Linacon and the FTC. That's playing more and more of a role, especially as we get closer to the election.
I mean, this is a private acquisition of a private company, so I don't know.
I think that's the smoke screen, the monopoly stuff, the FTC stuff. I don't think AMD has that kind of juice in the market where they're going to start.
Well, I mean,
considering
the for that is NVIDIA's got 92% market share. Is it?
Right.
Do you want to knock the?
You want to knock the next guy? It don't make sense. I have a different but similar story on this though, and it's that AMD for 20 plus years has always been the bridesmaid. They were always just on the cusp of being the leader, right? They were nipping at Intel's heels there for a while.
There would be a performance leader for 6 months, and then Intel would announce it.
Right. They're always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Is this in their mind, a bold move, betting $5 billion, which is a significant amount of money, and a good amount of this money is cash. I don't know how much they're going to recoup selling the server piece, but they're laying out a good amount of cash here. Is this their move to get to the altar?
I assume they had to put in some due diligence, and they are putting a lot of faith in this move.
Yeah, as I say, Dan, Lisa Su's very, very smart, so they haven't got into this space on a whim, for sure.
I got one last question. I'll throw it out at Jon and Steven, if either of you know, or Mike, if you know. In reading through all of these things, I'm not 100% sure of what ZT Systems does around AI, particularly. Are they making AI chips?
No.
No.
I mean, that's the air cover that you get for spending 4.9 million.
You have to mention AI somewhere and from.
Yeah, I mean, it's 2024.
All right, so wasn't me just missing
it's an
something?
AI acquisition. Yeah, it's one of those. I mean, we
they
dropped
have to.
some new research earlier this week. You know, this probably is the sort of killer here. 138 billion market by 2028. 30% 5-year CAGR from 38 billion up to that 138 billion. 74% of that is GPU. So this market's growing. It's growing fast. If Lisa's seen something strategic that helps her grab part of that market and flip some of that in NVIDIA market share, we'll be looking back 5 years from now going, wow, this was an amazing
What a great deal. Yeah.
I think that the two things that they really have in my mind are the architecture for the rack that they create for putting in those systems is apparently, people are going, this is optimized for AI. It's not that the chip is what they're building. It's more of the core infrastructure and how those pieces fit together in a way that is more energy efficient. And I think that what they're saying is that can become a standard for implementing AI architectures in a data center. To the degree other cloud service providers agree, I don't know, because last time I checked, AWS and Microsoft know how to build their own rack, but maybe they're tired of building it. But there are a lot of other cloud service providers out there.
Absolutely. Well, we're about out of time. I want to leave us with one thing. We mentioned Secaucus, New Jersey, in the beginning of the show. And you know what? If I'm not mistaken, there was another entrepreneur, inventor out of Secaucus, a guy named Edison. Mm-hmm. Wasn't his lab in Secaucus? Where
I believe at one point, yes, their empire was there.
Yes, that was it. So don't sell Secaucus short, folks. Anyway, we're going to take a break here on Techstrong TV. We're going to come back and let's talk about the White House investing millions to study open source.
I'm Bonnie Schneider, sustainability contributor to the Techstrong Group. I'm excited to introduce you to a groundbreaking new initiative from Techstrong Research, the Sustainability Pulse Meter. The Pulse Meter offers valuable insights into how environmental responsibility factors into tech purchasing decisions for key players in the industry. Position your company as a leader in the industry and differentiate from your competitors with the Sustainability Pulse Meter, offered exclusively from Techstrong Research.
Hello, folks. We're back. And yes, the White House is investing $11 million in something called the Open Source Software Prevalence Initiative. Classic government kind of logo.
We have initials for that? Open Source Software, OSS, Prevalent, OSSPI.
Yeah, I don't think it kind of spells anything, but, they're not exactly the marketing guys, so this is as good as it gets. I'm going to start with you. What's your impressions of all of this? Because we've been talking about this open source software security issue for a while, but is the government here kind of stepping up? Is this our tax dollars at work finally?
I'm here from the government. From the government, and I'm here to help. But look, I will tell you that many countries around the world, including most of the EU countries, have done their own open source sort of studies, and many of them have made, policy where they're going to use X percentage of open source or entirely open source. Generally, it was sort of an anti-Microsoft or Silicon Valley thing. I'm not sure, is security driving this, or is cost savings driving it, or is it a lot of that Biden infrastructure money that we got laying around that they're putting to use here? I'll be honest, I'm going to go to Steven here for a second, but what's interesting to me is the definition of critical infrastructure, where the government is saying we're going to apply this to critical infrastructure, is pretty broad by the United States government. It includes everything from water utilities and electric utilities to financial services to schools. So when you add all that stuff up, I'm like, $11 million isn't going to cover it.
Well, that's my first reaction. I mean, the best way to give that $11 million would be I'd give it directly to the Linux Foundation and say, go set up a collaborative project.
I think Jim Zemeskis is here waiting to give you a share of something, Steven.
I'll call up Jim Zemlin and
right.
Yeah, call up Zemlin and say, here's 11 million. I mean, if that then went into bounties, if that went into if the government's planning to do this, 11 million will just go in the way.
It's a drop in the bucket.
But I think if you were meaningfully able to invest that in an open source project, I mean, this goes back to the SolarWinds type hack from a couple of years ago. You know, you want to know where this source code comes from in a CI/CD pipeline. You want to be able to go and be able to check. We've done a good job of that as an industry since that supply chain hack. Obviously, there's more work to be done. I think the government's doing the right thing. My two questions are, is 11 million enough? And where are they going to spend the 11 million? I think 11 million would be enough if it was just a donation to the Linux Foundation to bootstrap the community to do something meaningful. If it's going to be a government program, 11 million is going to be a drop in the ocean and a waste.
Doesn't cover the printing cost.
There is another choice here. DevCon launched a volunteer program to help.
Yes, I did
the infrastructure stuff, and maybe those guys can use $11 million because
you can create a bounty source fund for this type of stuff. 11 million buys you a lot of bounty source payments. So it's
make a hell of a party in Vegas.
Yeah. You were going to say something?
Amanda, what were you going to say?
Yes, I was going to say, aside from money here, I think it's important who they're going to be working with, the team that they work with, the level of knowledge is important, because the first thing I was thinking about was, Jon, your article earlier this week about the government getting involved in some things in California and the uproar there, because a lot of them think they really don't know what they're talking about here. So the team that they have behind them, I think, is going to be important.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that was a typo when I first saw 11 million. I thought, I mean, what does 11 million get you, really? I mean, I'm thinking like in terms of even like a sports analogy, you get like a backup outfielder for $11 million a year.
You were overestimating what government employees get paid, by the way.
Okay. But I mean,
but it's open source and it's free. Excuse me.
Is this part of this? So the Biden administration's cybersecurity push, among other objectives, is to shift the responsibility away from the users and toward its creators. Is that part of what's going on here?
So, I had my own conspiracy theory. Are they just putting a pittance into this? Because the real, end game is to say that open source is not secure and move away from open source.
Do you think there's lobbyists at work here, maybe, who are kind of saying, hey, the government, this stuff isn't secure, it's going to cost you more to do all this stuff, and you should buy some old-fashioned proprietary platforms?
God's software, baby.
I don't know.
Makes the world go round.
I think that ship has sailed, though, hasn't it? I mean,
look, why all conspiracy theories have to be sane and logical? No, that's why they're conspiracy theories.
I would go back to what Jon was saying, and I do think that is part of the ulterior motive here. They do have this secure by design program, and they are going out and kind of starting to beat people up, saying you need to build software that is secure by design. I think the sad part of this thing is a lot of the people running this critical infrastructure have no idea what software is running underneath that thing. So maybe we do have to start at literally zero, which is, what are you running and where did you get it and what version of it is it? And it's all that kind of low level stuff, just so I can call out to a water utility and said, folks, you can't run that.
I mean, I think for me, maybe I'm a small government guy and maybe that feeds. I think the public markets, software companies, open source projects, the incentive structure's there to fix this. I have a really simple rubric. People buy things in the enterprise world for 3 reasons: make money, save money, not get fired. And this is a not get fired discussion.
Yeah, no doubt.
So I think from a personal perspective, from a company perspective, I mean, what are we, a month on from CrowdStrike? They report earnings, I think, tomorrow. the incentive structure's enough. I mean, Delta, you need to tell Delta that knowing where all your software came from and having a software root of trust is important. The incentive structure's there. What's the government doing just getting involved in this? Yes, go have some meetings with the open source community. Go, get involved. But putting money into this space, I don't know where that adds value. And certainly not at 11 million anyway.
Well, I would disagree on this point. Like when I was talking to the DEF CON folks, they were saying that there's like 50,000 water utilities alone that are running various industrial control systems that have open source software in it. And that's about as much as they could initially take on. When you add up all the other things that are critical infrastructure, somebody has to start this ball rolling because those guys don't have the resources to go fight this. I mean, there's some water utility sitting up in, I'll randomly pick Vermont. There's probably 2 people running the whole thing.
But does 11 million kickstart that, or is it a problem that CrowdStrike goes fix, that Red Hat goes fix? Is that SUSE? There's enough people in this space that are for-profit companies. Do they go and fix it because the incentive structure's right? Is 11 million enough of an accelerant to start that fire? I don't.
Well, maybe the next bill that comes through is going to be, 50
maybe this,
million.
right? Maybe this is just the initial.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you something. I've been involved in this open source and government thing for many, many years. Back when I was one of the co-founders of a company called Still Secure. We worked a lot with NERC and FERC. I don't know if you guys are familiar with NERC FERC.
They were a cartoon show.
No, not that was NERC FERC. NERC FERC are the people who run electrical utilities, nuclear generating plants, and so forth. And, there was a time where that was really tightly held and closed secrets, right? How a nuclear generating plant's knock sock was wired, for instance, right? And then they went through this big open source renaissance where they opened up and they said, it is great. It lowers our costs. It makes it open standards and all of these things. And that was a big push in government, right? For a period there, let's say I'll say later half of the, 25 to 2010, all the way, and it started around then and continues, where I think what this software usage is going to show is that open source is firmly rooted in government.
No doubt.
Right? They prefer open source. There was a preference for open source. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that that's there, and maybe this study sort of, rubber stamps that and says, okay, as a result of that, here's what we're going to do. I do agree. I'd almost turn this over. Seriously, Steven, I turn it over to the Linux Foundation. Let them go do this survey.
I would say
be 11 million well spent. You'll actually get return on that. You turn up to Jim Semlin, give him 11 million. You'll see stuff actually happen.
Yeah.
I think maybe we spend the 11 million, and for lack of a better term, there's a certain amount of shame that we're going to spotlight on some folks who are not updating these systems, and then you can call in the Linux Foundation, DevCon, and say,
I don't think 11 million does it. I think it'll be $11 million to print the report when they're done. Right? I mean, you know how they operate, and I'm a big government fan, but it's $11 million. It's nothing to them.
United States Printing Office will be in work all this time.
Absolutely. For $11 million, I'll get the title page. But I guess we'll see. Is there, and forgive me, I don't remember, but is there an end date on this thing? When are we going to see something, or is this just open-ended?
I think they're just getting started.
KPIs so you can hold people
silly me.
We just talked about the government for 10 minutes. I mean, seriously, did you ask that question?
Yeah, I get it. All right. So you know what? I'll probably be retired by the time this is done, but whatever. It's all good. It's all good. Yeah. Let's take a break here. And look, maybe they should fund $11 million. We could study open source here on the Techstrong Gang. But we're going to take a break. You're watching Techstrong Gang. We're coming back with tech layoffs are still out there. They seem to even be surging, perhaps.
Cloud Native Now is the web's leading resource for the growing cloud native ecosystem. CloudNativeNow.com is your destination for news, thought leadership, features, and webinars on cloud-native architecture, Kubernetes, serverless, cloud-native application development, microservices, service mesh, cloud-native security, and more. Stay on the cutting edge of modern application development at Cloud Native Now.
All right, folks, we're back, and it's unfortunate, but there has been this massive surge of layoffs in the tech sector. A lot of it started with Intel, and then we saw Cisco and a bunch of other folks. And I think just about every one of us knows somebody in this industry who's been laid off lately. And I guess, Jon, what's going on here? I mean, a lot of it seems to be emanating out of the valley from companies there. I mean, are there that many excess employees, or is there something more afoot here?
I think there are multiple factors in play. And I think the latest number I saw was more than 124,000 workers have been laid off this year so far. And you're right. It's with Intel and Cisco's layoffs, they have multiple layoffs. Salesforce has had layoffs. I mean, literally, if I look out the window, I can see the husk of the shell of what used to be Oracle's headquarters. Nobody goes to work there, by the way. I know their headquarters was in Nashville now. After they left Austin, but still, there's nobody there. This real estate just empty. So there's several factors. There's inflation and higher interest rates. There's the economic downturn or recession fears. That I'm still hearing this excuse: pandemic overhiring. That was used the last couple of years to explain layoffs, outsourcing, offshoring, and then there's the AI factor. So AI is like one of these technologies where we have people rushing to embrace it, and the ultimate outcome might be more people losing their jobs because they're being replaced by technology, not by humans. So it's real. I have a number of friends who have been laid off, who have been looking for work for a year. I've never encountered this in the 35 plus years that I've been in this industry. The longer gaps, there's more power that's shifting to the employers. So they're expecting people to go in, which is reasonable because they're paying for the office space. But again, we went from this one extreme where we were overhiring, where people were working from home and getting all sorts of perks that they wanted, to the point now where it's a scramble. I mean, there are job openings and there are hundreds of people applying for one job. It's really there, and I don't see it changing in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I have some friends that back during the pandemic, they really skilled up. Like they took a coding boot camp, or they went and did the Salesforce Trailheads thing and got jobs. And now a lot of them are out of work because of what you mentioned. I guess the overhiring, and they weren't as skilled as a lot of other people. It was the basic skill level set, and now they're out of jobs, still looking for roles. And they were so excited about the pay scale increase, and now they're not getting those types of offers with their skill set.
You know, the one thing I should have mentioned I didn't was full-time jobs are hard to be had, but there is a lot of freelance. There is a lot of contract work that there is an abundance of. In fact, there's tons of it rolling, and I know of so many opportunities. But then again, it's done where you work, a couple of days a week. You get paid well, but you're not on the company roll. You're not,
and it's up and down. It's just not steady.
It seems like more and more tech companies are going that way, though, with hiring only contract and not wanting to bring them on into full employment.
Well, I think you're at an inflection point. I mean, for me, if you're in a coding space, we just gave every developer a 30% cheat code to unlock productivity. Whether you think it's going to replace coders and developers completely, I don't subscribe to that. But using these tools and these co-pilots and these assistants and whatever, that's a 30% productivity gain. Now, organizations are faced with a choice there. Do I just get rid of 30% of the people? Do I get back on track with the backlog I was up against and get, actually deliver some of these projects on time? Or do I hit the accelerator pedal because my business is growing and I need 30% more productivity, and I'm going to keep headcount the same? I think depending on where you are as a business, that you're going to make one of those three decisions based on unlocking this type of productivity gain. One of the things we're seeing a lot happen is marketing. I was chatting to a CMO a few weeks back. They've created a really useful, I think, interesting use case. What they've done is ingested all of their technical product information, all of their marketing content into a private LLM model. And then whenever they needed any short content for a website or a blog or something else, they were just hanging on front of it an LLM and being able to ask it questions and say, hey, write me 4-sentence description of this product for the website. If you're in content marketing and you're A, not using these tools, or B, you're sort of scared, I think you're right. You know, you've got to be using these tools first off, so you want to be at the front of that line for the productivity. And then if you're not using these tools, very, very worrying dynamic of, you know, website content, quick blogs, that type of stuff. AI is perfect for that type of content creation.
We see it here at Techstrong.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a few views on this. First of all, the tech layoffs are not over. Right? I think it was it last week or the week before that Cisco announced a pretty big one?
It's their second.
I just, you know, you can tell on LinkedIn when people start reaching out to you, you know, the recent layoffs. And I just got reached out yesterday. Some of the companies in the DevOps space just did some more layoffs. So layoffs are continuing. And let me put on my entrepreneur, founder, CEO hat here as the CEO of Techstrong, right? So first of all, AI is very real to us, right? We're in the content business, creating content. We pay a decent chunk of our revenue goes towards hiring writers to write content. And the idea of having AI write that content as the CEO here, it's I'm not going to lie, it's very appealing. Unfortunately, what we have found to date is 30% is not enough, John, Steven, to your point, right, on 30%. You still got to come up with that other 70%, and that you're going to pay for. But secondly, on a couple of the items, yes, during COVID, our business was booming, right? Especially our virtual event business. People couldn't go anywhere. We had a captive audience. Our registrations for virtual events and webinars, man, they were through the roof. We hired like mad. And I think I'm typical of many entrepreneurial founders, right? No one likes to lay people off. People have families. They have bills to pay. They have there's 8 million stories in the naked city. And so no one likes to lay off. But quite frankly, business has changed. And I don't think it's just about AI. I do think, I forget if it was you, Steven, or one of the other Futurum analysts who said, hey, most of the tech companies have been waiting for a recession that hasn't come for the last 2 years. They have been told by their VCs, by their investors, by their shareholders that the rainy day is here. And I hope you've saved for your rainy day because you're not getting more money. You better hold on to your dollars. We see it from our customers where they just used to sign up for, give me 200 leads. Now they want 200 leads that are, on Tuesdays, that are ready for Wednesday, that are of a certain size, shape, and color. There's so much more hair on these deals that it's like threading a needle. It's a harder business environment. And so businesses in hard business environments have to make hard choices. And what we're finding, and we have found this, and I've spoken to many, many founders and CEOs, is, you know what? It's painful to lay off, but it doesn't really seem to affect the productivity of the business. Whether that's from AI or not, I don't know, but it doesn't.
We balance it out with.
The way I look at this, Alan, is, and we can think all the things we want to think about Elon Musk, and all of them would be valid. But he pushed this domino when he took over Twitter. 7,500 employees running a website that all of us logged into every day. And then he said, you know what? I can run it with 2,000. And every CEO everywhere in tech just folded their arms and went, will it break? Will it break? Now, has he broken the content? You know, you could argue that. But I haven't seen the website or the mobile app miss a beat. And what you've actually seen is more feature, function, and capability come out of X than you did in the 5 years previous. So every CEO's gone, you can take 7,500 people and get more work out of 2,000 people.
That's
an experiment. I'll try.
Yeah, that's very interesting that you say that, Stephen, because that's something I kept coming across a couple of years ago when I was writing about layoffs, is that in a sense, he kind of, in a sense, opened the floodgates because other CEOs or executives were thinking along the same lines, but they were waiting for someone like him to take the first step, and then they followed suit. And but it's not just layoffs either. It's just austerity in terms of things like shows. They're scaling back a little bit. They're going more to virtual. They're not spending as much any resources across the board. It's not just not hiring.
But a large part of those cuts they made were the content filter people, which may be why you see what you see there.
But I also think, there is empire building when times are good and people go, I'm going to hire somebody to do that because I'll have more control over them. But, the math would always say, even in good times, that should have been a contractor function anyway. But they decide that, well, I'm vice president such and such, and I need
I have 2,500 people reporting to me, so I must be bigger than you.
Right.
But
can I mention one other thing? Is like one company I should have mentioned too is Google. They've been laying people off, not at number, but it's just no matter what your experience, 1 year, 10 years, 20 years, they were indiscriminate about it, and they continued to do so. They have been cutting back consistently.
Meanwhile, I would observe though that other sectors outside of tech are not experiencing.
They don't seem to be affected by this. No.
So theoretically, a lot of those people who are working in tech should be able to migrate into some of these other.
They don't want
industries. Yeah, they don't want to is another issue. But at the end of the day, oil and gas industry is rocking. The last time,
many industries, health, pharma, they're rocking. But on the contractor issue, let me again put on my CEO hat here. I recently, we're doing this merger with the Futurum Group, so we've been going through our list and checking it twice, trying to find out who's naughty and nice. And I will tell you, it's shocking the amount of money that goes into benefits. And we're not Silicon Valley, but we try to do like what the tech industry does, which is give a good benefits package all around. But you know what? It costs anywhere from 20 to 33% over and above the employee's salary comp for their benefits. So when you look at saying, all right, can we move this person from a FTE full-time employee or equivalent to a contractor, off the bat, I'm saving, even if they work full-time, I'm saving 20 to 33%.
But the other way to look at that, Alan, is that sounds bad if you're a full-time employee. Maybe it's not bad. Hey, if you can be working for two different companies, you can be creative about how you manage your time. You can get more salary. You can have more control over your work hours. You can pick and choose when. So, I mean, I think you're seeing.
Funny you mentioned that, because a couple of years ago I was doing that same story. I was talking to people who had been laid off, and they were working for multiple companies as contract workers. They were making better money than they ever had before. They had to worry about their benefits, but they were turning down work.
I was chatting to a fractional CMO today.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, if someone else took care of healthcare, I'd be all for it. But it's not just healthcare. Look, I have friends. I had a conversation with a good friend of mine. He's a gang member on here. I'm not going to mention names. But he was saying, I'm making good money doing this consulting thing, but I need my health insurance. I stopped putting money into a 401k. And it's lumpy. Well, I've got like 3 gigs I got to do this month, but next month I don't got anything. And it's hard, right? It's not that steady work that you get with a steady full-time job. So it's not it's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
And so it's hard, but I do think to use one of Steven's points, we're at an inflection point where maybe more of the workforce is sort of entrepreneurially contractors, not full time, and they have multiple contracts, that they fulfill at the same time. And we need, as maybe the government could do this, to come up with something that universal health care, something they could buy in, like an Obamacare or something, but also importantly, 401ks. Because, our parents lived on pensions when they retired, if they lived that long, right? They lived on pensions. My generation, the only people who are on pensions are government workers.
I know
my kids' generation.
I know multiple 20-year-olds who have decided to get married just because the time was right on the healthcare side of it. Only one of us needs healthcare. The other one can be more.
Imagine if there was an election in, November, where we could maybe make some choices about things like this. Just imagine.
You don't hear people talking about it. We don't. Neither of the parties are talking about this. I think there's a ticking time bomb So I heard this I read this on a story a couple of weeks ago. I am what they call Gen Jones. So I'm at the tail end of a boomer, right before Gen X. Right. So it's like, I think they said 1958 through like 1968 or something, a Gen Jones. And by the way, that's Kamala Harris, Waltz, J.D. Vance. A lot of us are.
Waltz is 10 days younger than Brad Pitt.
Yes, 10 days.
That's literally the best fact I've heard in the last 2 weeks.
What does it matter?
No. But so the thing is, we are in that in between. We're probably okay. It's the ones after us, the Gen X, the Gen Zs. How many Gen X folks who have done contracting, let's say, have put away money for 401k? What's going to happen? Boomers are aging out of the market. Gen X will be the next ones.
It's the biggest retirement. It's the biggest transfer of wealth ever. The boomers are going to give it all to their kids. So, we could talk about
God bless them then, right? Yeah.
I think the younger generation, though, is growing up with technology on such a level that they're more adaptable. They're going to embrace all these technologies. Right. There's going to be a lot of opportunities.
Right, much more opportunities.
John, you wanted to say something.
I'm just going to say the workforce has changed. I don't think it's ever going to be the same. It started from working from home, and it's this contract worker movement, whether we want it or not. And we're also working longer. People used to retire in their 50s and 60s. I don't think they can afford to do that now, for the most part. So we're going to have more people in the market.
I think as a society, though, we have to recognize that.
Yes.
And we need a new deal to come up with handling those kinds of workers.
So I was in Key Largo on the weekend, and I met a fellow who just retired, and he was probably on the 5th day of a bender. It was clearly like the 5 days since he retired. And he had a whole life plan, and yet I know other people who every time the stock market burps, they're like, I got to go back to work.
Yeah. And what was that statistic, Alan? You've mentioned this before. Like 80% of those people 60 and over have like less than $2,000 in savings.
Exactly. They're one paycheck away from being in the crapper. But look, we're not here to discuss politics, but vote for Steven Dickens.
I can't even stand in your election. I can maybe go for a congressional or senatorial seat, maybe a governor, but I can't go for the big
You're ineligible. Yeah. All right. Anyway,
I don't know if national health care was any good. Steven'd still be in England, right?
That's also true.
Don't get me started, Mike. Do not get me started.
I turn. Anyway, hey, we're going to end this one right here. It's been a great Techstrong Gang. Steven, John, Amanda, thanks for joining us. Mike, as always, it's been great. We've got a full Techstrong TV lineup following, so please do check that out. And, of course, we'll be back here tomorrow with another Techstrong Gang. But until then, this is Alan Schimmel for Techstrong. We're out.